About 6 months ago, I discovered one of the most disgusting horror books that has ever been written. It was recommended to me when I covered some other gross books, but none have ever really come close to that gross factor of the horror book, The Slob by Aaron Beauregard. It is regarded as one of the most disgusting splatterpunk books ever written. If you do not know what splatterpunk is, it is a genre of horror that rejects the subtle horror of modern-day horror in favor of extreme and disgusting horror that pushes boundaries. The Slob is a book that is known to be disgusting even amongst splatterpunk books. Today, we are going to be covering the sequel to The Slob, and that book we are covering today is The Son of the Slob. If you haven't read it or seen my first video on the first book, which is on screen right now, I recommend you watch that video first, as there are several returning characters in this book that you might not understand if you haven't read or seen the original video. This book picks up right where the first one left off, so you really should watch the original one. This book, however, unlike its predecessor, is actually a little bit deeper than just straight up torture porn. Not much, but it has slightly more of a theme, but it's still just as disgusting. So maybe that'll make you want to get into this one. If you do not know how we do things on this channel, let me break it down for you. We start out with an intro, which you are listening to now, where we go over the author and a little bit about the book we are about to cover. Then we get into the summary, which is the bulk of the video where we do just that, summarize the book. Then finally we get into the analysis, where we get into the themes or the messages of the book. However, before we start, I wanted to thank you all for 60,000 subscribers yet again. It really means the world to me that I can do this as a job, and you are really all heroes for letting me do this by watching these videos. But without waffling on any further, let us get into Aaron Beauregard's Son of the Slob. Vera says she was getting tired of looking at Dr. Plankton's face. He was pale and angular like a vampire. He looked kinda like a monster. But Vera knows that through experience that monsters don't always look that scary. They look like everybody else. They go to their job, do their work, and go to bed just like everybody else. And that is scarier than any Hollywood monster. Vera? He asks, noticing her spacing out. She apologizes and asks, where was she? Dr. Plankton sort of annoyedly taps his pencil on the notebook. Vera doesn't really care though. She has stared at the most vile person in the face since arrived. Some nerd isn't going to intimidate her. She looks at her reflection in the reflective wood surface in the office. She looks horrible. Although her face is healed, her bone structure is permanently disfigured. Bumps still line her skin and scars line her face. She says she will never truly heal from the wounds that the Slob left her. Her face was a permanent reminder. You were talking about your time at the Lonely Bug Motel, Dr. Plankton asks. Vera says, fine, but she should start with the Hilton, the job she worked at before the Slob incident. When she came back after that whole traumatic thing, they fired her. They claimed it was layoffs, but she knows it was because of her disfigured face. Children would point at her and cry. She saw the complaints with her own two eyes about how she looked. They fired her because she was ugly and disfigured, she says. Dr. Plankton says, you're not ugly, Vera. You're just unique. Vera stops him and says, spare his pity. She's the one paying for this treatment, so spare her. She says, yes. Of course she hates what happened at the Hilton, but it won't change anything. Dr. Plankton asks, what about the Lonely Motel? What happened after the Hilton? Vera explains that after she got fired, she got a job at the Lonely Bug Motel, a disgusting motel where she cleaned up condoms, cum, and used syringes. But at the very least, no one looked twice at her. She was just another cog in the machine. Dr. Plankton says, well, that's good to find some optimism in it. She just has to do her job and go home, right? Vera laughs to herself. Yeah, home. That's where the real trouble starts. Dr. Plankton asks if her and Daniel are still sleeping in separate rooms. She says yes, and he asks, are you happy with that arrangement? Vera says she never really thought about that. She doesn't mind the quiet, especially with all the fights that used to happen, but there is a part of her that misses Daniel though. Her old best friend and lover. All the good memories with her husband. I don't know, Vera replies. Dr. Plankton says that she should ponder that question. In fact, he wants her to confront it. He knows that Vera has shot down the idea before, but he really thinks that Daniel should come to their next session. She thinks about it, and for once, she thinks that maybe the only way to get past these problems with her husband are to confront them. So she says, okay, she'll talk to him. He probably won't like the idea, though. Dr. Plankton says that's good, but this session's time is up. Plankton says that he hopes that she gets a good night's sleep, and Vera leaves. She thinks, well, it's not going to be a good night. She hasn't had a good night since she knocked on that Slob's door 8 years ago. She got home and opened up the door. She didn't even want to turn on the light. She knew what she would find. A disgusting mess of a home filled with brown streaks on the wall, rotten food all over, and an ever-growing pile of whiskey bottles courtesy of Daniel. She knows Daniel or her will not clean it. But she has to face this. She lives in a house of ghosts. She walks up the stairs and looks at Daniel's door. She wanted to rush in and kiss him and have things all go back to normal, but she knew she couldn't. Maybe the therapy will help. The door next to Daniel, though, was the source of all their troubles. She knew it wasn't Harold's fault. A child of rape with the worst genetics. The police didn't even know who the slob was. 8 years ago, during the investigation, they found almost nothing. The house was set on fire by the time the investigators got to the scene of the crime. The only record was it was owned by a rich man named Stefan, who was soon found on a big mansion's ground in a shallow grave. The police had no way of knowing who the father was. Maybe that's why she kept Harold. Maybe to keep a memory of that event and that it happened. Or maybe she had just seen so much death and the worst of humanity that she couldn't help but spare the fetus in her belly after the incident. But it didn't matter. This is their life. She gave birth to Harold Harlow. But she knows that to Daniel, and even sometimes to her, he was just the son of the slob. Vera arrived at the Lonely Bug Motel the next morning. All the hookers and pimps and drug dealers were going home now. She walked in the front office and saw Felix. He was a fat man reading a nudie mag. Normally, reading a porno mag at work at the front desk of a hotel would be despicable, but at this place, it wasn't too out of place. Felix looks at Vera and smugly says, "You know, you're so much better than the girls in these mags. You're so real. I bet people don't look at you on account of your face, but I still think you're pretty." Vera clenches her teeth and grabs the cleaning cart. "Vera, I'm fucking talking to you!" Vera screams back that she has a husband. At least being married, despite all of the troubles it has come with recently, was still a good excuse not to talk to Felix. Vera made her way up to the first room and prepared herself and went in to clean. She opened the door and was hit by an immediately bad smell. She was used to bad smells nowadays due to her home life, but this was more of a chemical smell than a rotten smell. With how much she worked here, she could give a drug dog the run for its money. She could tell that whoever was in this room was doing angel dust. It made people prone to rage and stuff, hence the new hole in the wall, she thought. She did what she normally did in the motel. Cleaned the floor, stripped the bed, cleaned the literal shit off the bed too, and remade everything. There was a large bed bug problem in the Lonely Bug Motel too, but she realizes that she just has to put a sheet over the bed bugs and they won't be a problem. She thought it was just like her face, but instead, she cannot cover her face with a sheet. It was permanently scarred. Vera went home and stood outside her front door. She wondered what she would see today. She knew the once spotless condition of her house was a thing of the past. It is now filled with filth to the brim. Once she walked inside, she felt the weight of it all. She could feel like something happened in this house. It felt like when her sister Lisa ended her own life in her childhood home. She had to scrub some of Lisa's remains off of the bedroom floor, but whenever she went back into that room, she could feel that something happened in here. Her house was now the same as that. She walked upstairs and felt sick as she looked into Harold's door. She saw him on the bed. His obese frame made him look like a middle schooler, despite him being only 7. His hair was patchy and brown, almost as if he exited her womb balding. She looked down and then noticed it. She thought how Harold shouldn't need diapers at the age of 7, but he's not mentally all there. He had stripped off his diaper and was picking some of the brown watery substance in his diaper and eating it. Vera had to look away as the brown substance leaked from the corners of his mouth as he chewed on his own fecal matter. Vera shakenly walks up and wipes the corners of his mouth with the back of her hand. Harold didn't even notice, though, with a stare that Vera says that an electroshock patient wouldn't even have. She felt so sick, even with all that she's experienced. Harold finally notices her, and Vera says that she couldn't even reprimand him. He wouldn't understand anyway. And besides, her spirit was too broken to yell at him anyway. He tried to grab another handful of feces as Vera closes the door. The next day was her day off. She spent it lying in bed listening to the rain. She had no idea if Daniel was going to join her for therapy tonight. Last night, she had the juvenile idea of making a note that you would see in high school asking if he was going, indicating he should circle yes or no on it. She found it under his door this morning, covered in mouse droppings, a big check mark next to the yes on it. Vera thought that I think she found a babysitter recently in advance. She wondered if this one could handle Harold. But before she could think about that, she thought about tonight and how it was going to go with Daniel at the therapist. They had hired babysitters for Harold before, mostly when her and Daniel tried to have a date night to rekindle what little relationship they had left. But whenever they came home, they would be met by tears and bloodshot eyes of the babysitters saying, "Why didn't you tell me he was like this?" Or screaming at the top of their lungs to keep that monster away from them. Vera wonders if her son was really that bad. They never said what he did out of embarrassment, but they would never come back. Vera looked down at the newspaper clipping. Eve Barron, babysitter. Was this Eve Barron really capable of handling a child like Harold? Or would she join his babysitter club? Vera thinks that she needs to do this therapy with Daniel though. And if it causes Eve Barron to have one terrible night, so be it. Vera ran a bath for Harold and she looked at his big eyeballs as she washed him. Whenever it was just the two of them in a room, she felt something for her child. He didn't know what he was doing, and with all of his black teeth and cleft palate, he would look at her, and Vera knew that her child loved her. It wasn't his fault that he was mentally retarded. She could tell that he knew that she saved him. He could be in some disgusting mental asylum somewhere or in the waste bin of an abortion clinic, but Vera made sure that he at least could have somewhat of a normal life. She loved him too. Are you gonna be good for Eve, sweetie? So mommy and daddy can make this all better? He looked up at her. He didn't say anything, of course, but she felt it was a miracle he seemed to hear her. Tonight could be a turning point. Things could start to get better tonight. Or it could get a whole lot worse. As Vera and Daniel pulled away from Eve Barron's house, she felt anxious. She knew that Eve felt betrayed once they opened the door and she saw Harold. Over the phone earlier today, she mentioned that Harold had special needs, but when they opened the door a minute ago, Vera saw as Eve's eyes' twinkles went out when she saw the child. It was only for a few hours, though. She could handle it, Vera thinks. As they drove to Dr. Plankton's, Vera says it was like all the other interactions with her husband. Silent. She helped him out of the car as usual, and he would thank her, but as soon as they saw Dr. Plankton in his usual vampire-like attire, she felt that Dr. Plankton looked a little different. A slight curl to his mouth as if he was amused. Daniel, thank you for joining us tonight. I think this session will be important to help Vera on the road to recovery. And Vera, thank you for the courage to bring Daniel here. Dr. Plankton lifts up his black pen and says, today, the plan is to rebuild the roadways of communication. It will start with the basics, and then from those basics, they can branch out and discuss more important matters. Dr. Plankton says that Vera has told him that there is a great strain in the relationship right now. So before they start with the basics of communication, he wants to go backwards a bit. He wants them both to think about something that they remember that made them happy from the first month that they met. Vera didn't expect much, but Daniel gives a slight smile and turns to her and asks, what did the cannibal do after he dumped his girlfriend? Dr. Plankton asks, what? And Daniel continues, he wiped his ass. Dr. Plankton confusedly says he assumes that there is some significance to this dark joke. Daniel's eyes begin to water and his lip trembles. It was a joke that she told me when we first met. It was right after my time in Nam, and it made me laugh. She brought my smile back. Emotions were already running high, Vera thought. But at least they were good emotions. Dr. Plankton says, that's a wonderful example, Daniel. He then turns to Vera and asks her to do the same. Her mind races, thinking of maybe talking about all the wonderful meals he cooked, but instead she wanted to go with a memory that was more physical. The night we watched Fatal Attraction. It's a bit personal, but Daniel knows what I mean. Daniel's eyes lit up for a second recounting it, but it immediately turned to disgust almost. Disdain. Vera wondered why. That night they had sex so much that she never felt she'd been more in love with someone so much before. So why was he angry? She wondered. Dr. Plankton says that, Daniel, by your expression, I can tell that you don't feel the same way, or you have a different opinion. Why? Daniel says that Vera should know why. Dr. Plankton says, yes, she might, but I want to hear it. Daniel says that Vera isn't wrong. It was a wonderful night. He thought he'd found his soulmate. As they made love, he got her pregnant. Vera then gets it. The pregnancy. She should have seen that coming. Of course he'd take it in that direction. The same pregnancy the slob turned into hamburger meat and had the Bissell suck out of her. Daniel continues that, well, it was great, but due to her pregnancy, well, you know the rest of the story, Doc. Dr. Plankton says, I do, but I want to hear the rest of the story from your perspective, Daniel. Daniel takes out a flask from his blazer jacket and asks, do you mind, Doc? He hasn't had a sip all day. Before Dr. Plankton could say no, he takes a sip of the alcohol anyway. Daniel says that, well, it wasn't pretty. Pretty, Vera thought. That word, pretty. She hadn't felt that way in a long time. Maybe that's why she let the garbage and filth overflow her house now. So the pictures of her in the past would be covered. Daniel, could you please stop drinking? Dr. Plankton asked as he politely finishes off his flask. Daniel says, well, he knows the rest of the story. It all started with that fucking door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman. And Vera fell for it hook, line, and sinker. It wasn't my fault, Vera says. And Dr. Plankton says, please let Daniel finish. You'll get your turn. Daniel says he knows the rest. Dr. Plankton says, well, he knows it's not fair they got put in this situation. It's not their fault. Daniel slurs his words and says, it certainly isn't my fault. Vera couldn't hold back anymore and says, maybe if he sold his car, this wouldn't have happened. They argue back and forth, and Dr. Plankton says that, please, he understands that they have hostilities and anger, but it's important they discuss this with civility. Daniel says he'll continue then. 1 week turned into 2 weeks with selling vacuums. Sure, the money was good, but on the very last house in the country, she met with that monster. He raped and tortured her, and eventually he planted his seed for the monster they live with today. Dr. Plankton asks if he means his son, Harold. Daniel scoffs and says, not his son. He just lives with him. Dr. Plankton says, he thinks he gets it. Looking at Harold reminds Daniel of the incident due to him being biologically the son of the rapist of your wife. Vera has told him the reason why she kept the baby, but every time Daniel looks at him, it reopens the wound, right? Daniel grits his teeth and nods. The doctor says, okay. But it's not Harold's fault. He's still your family, Daniel. Family comes in all shapes and sizes, after all. Daniel scoffs and says he finds that almost comical. Dr. Plankton, have you ever met Harold Harlow? In Eve Barron's house, she sat in her living room with Harold Harlow as he watched Pinky and the Brain. Goated show, by the way. She was happy he was occupied as his nightmarish features put her off. He was bigger than any 7-year-old she'd ever seen before. Plus, his disfigurement made him kind of hard to look at. Poor kid. I bet he has a hell of a time in school, she thinks. She damns her past thoughts. Eve sat there drinking tea as her bowels began to hurt. But she didn't want to leave Harold alone. She really had to use the restroom for some time now. She says, Harold, sweetie, I'll be right back, okay? She figured he couldn't get into too much trouble in just a few minutes. As soon as she left, though, Pinky and the Brain went to commercial. One for corn dogs. Harold's stomach rumbled and he said, snack, to himself. He got up and looked around. On top of the fireplace mantel, there was a big jar. Next to it was a memorial portrait. But to Harold, this urn looked just like a cookie jar. The red jar was calling to him. He opened it up and stuck his hairy hands inside. The color was that of cookies, but they weren't solid. But maybe they still tasted the same, he thinks. He took a handful of the dead woman's ashes and put it in his mouth. It was dusty, and he had to kick up some saliva in his mouth to get it down. He coughed, spewing out a dust cloud on the TV. Some watery vomit entered his throat, and it helped the dusty bones go down earlier. Harold looked up as the mortified scream pierced the air. Eve rightfully screams at Harold as he confusedly smiles at her. A few hours later, they all drove home together. Harold clicked his tongue on his gums, and it was getting really annoying. Vera thought that noise was really annoying, so she couldn't even imagine how Daniel was feeling. He already hated Harold, but this noise was unbearable. Not to mention, it was horrible what Harold did to Eve's grandmother while they were at the therapy. But Vera wonders if Eve really should have left him alone. She was supposed to be a professional, right? No doubt it was a horrible night, though. The shrink did little more but drive a bigger wedge in between her and Daniel. But Vera just wanted Daniel to love Harold. She was a part of him, and she wanted the parts of her to outshine the parts of his real father inside of him. She beat the slob once, and she can do it again. As she's thinking this, Harold starts to make weird movements to accompany his annoying clicking sounds. "Would you stop that? Stop it!" Daniel screamed out, the first words of the drive. Harold, not understanding, kept going. "I said stop it!" he screamed out. Vera says, "He doesn't know what you're saying, Daniel." Daniel says, "Oh, he fucking knows what he's doing." Daniel warns him one more time to stop, and when Harold just pulls spit like he was doing before, Daniel backhands the poor child across the face. Vera starts putting her hands in Daniel's face, saying, "Don't you dare touch my son!" And this must have surprised them all, because there's never been violence in the past 10 years that they'd all known each other. And everything just went silent after that. They all just stared at the window as they drove. All three of them. Vera knew that she should be shocked at this point, but nothing surprised her anymore. She wanted to be anywhere but in the driver's seat right now, but that was almost a metaphor for her entire life. She looked in the rearview mirror at Harold smiling, the blood from his bloody nose trickling down to his rotten teeth. Vera woke up the next morning and put on her uniform. She looked out into the crack of dawn to see Harold waiting for his bus. She wondered if last night really happened. There had never been violence before, but nothing indicated it would change either. She thought about leaving Daniel, but she couldn't really survive without his disability checks. What Daniel did was reprehensible, but Vera thinks what Harold did was no better. But Harold had no idea what he was doing. She waited for the short bus to show up to go to Harold's Catholic school. She didn't want it to be late, because that in turn would make her late. Last thing she wants is to give Felix ammunition to interact with her. The reason she chose a Catholic school for Harold is because they took on mentally disabled children as a charity, no charge. Which is good, because otherwise they couldn't afford tuition. The nuns were also good to him, Vera thinks. Outside of one lone incident, Harold has never misbehaved at school. Sister Dumas explained that his grades weren't great, but a lot of the special needs children's grades weren't great. However, they always find their way, she says. Daniel lost faith in God after Nam, but Vera had a small amount of faith left. In fact, it's all she had, really. She wanted to believe that things happened for a reason. They had to. Harold had no hope in the modern world, so letting a Catholic school take over seemed appropriate. Besides, she feels like the big man upstairs owed her that much, at least after all she went through. The bus skirted around the corner, and Vera says, "Oh, thank God." Harold turns to her and says, "God?" Vera says, "Yes. God is always with you, Harold." He waddles off onto the bus, and it drives off. Sister Dumas waited for the special needs children to arrive at school, and once they did, she stared all of them down with her Griffith blue eyes and told them to follow along, single file. And they do, and they go through the nasty wooden doors to the basement of the Catholic school. The special classroom had no windows. It had a perpetual drip from the upstairs girls' bathroom, and it had a mold problem. Harold put his bag over his desk and his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles lunchbox under his desk. There were only 3 children in this class. To Harold's right was Shelley. Shelley was just as obese as Harold, but much smaller in stature. She had a lion's mane of hair, which just had a ton of scrunchies adorned on it. To Harold's right was a boy named Benji, a boy 2 years Harold and Shelley's senior, despite him being small and frail. He nervously picked his fingernails, and Sister Dumas slapped her old hand down on the desk and says, "Benji! I told you no picking." The wicked nun turns to Shelley and asks her to lead them in prayer. Shelley gulps and sits on her hands and starts, "Our Father, who art..." Sister Dumas slams her hand on the desk yet again and says, "That was a test. One, you have miserably failed. You all have a long way to go before you are deserving of prayer, of praying to my God." Shelley quietly apologizes, and Sister Dumas tells her that although her apology is appreciated, she still has to be punished. Sister Dumas looked up at the brown wastewater dropping into the bucket on the floor. "Today, you are going to take 2 sips from the collection bucket," she says. Shelley cries out for mercy, but Sister Dumas tells her to do it anyway. Shelley, though, remains seated, frozen by fear. Sister Dumas says, fine, if she wants to obey. She takes out a bag of uncooked rice and covers a small bit of the floor with it. She makes Shelley kneel down on it and drink from the gray bucket, the grains of uncooked rice digging into her obese knees. Sister Dumas makes her take a sip from the vile bucket filled with blood, piss, water, and vomit. She takes her 2 sips and disgustingly swallows. Dumas says that she has been forgiven. Just say her prayers while kneeling. After which, Sister Dumas says a prayer for all of them, in which she thanks God for this day, despite having these 3 monsters with her. She tells the 3 students to turn to page 54 of their math textbooks, and as she does, she writes the number on the board, which was good because none of them knew what a 54 looked like. Shelley, meanwhile, finished her prayer and went to the bathroom. Sister Dumas asks Harold, "What is 1 plus 3?" And Harold, not understanding, of course, just stares at her. Sister Dumas says, he doesn't want to talk, eh? She says God and her are going to make him speak today. He will learn to speak, and he will learn to do math. Sister Dumas yells at Shelley as she comes out of the bathroom and tells her to bring Harold up to her desk. Shelley whispers to Harold that Sister Dumas wants him at the desk. Shelley drags Harold up, and Sister Dumas tells Shelley to take off Harold's pants. She struggles and drops Harold's pants, and his diaper is on full display. A wretched smell fills the room, and Shelley whispers to Sister Dumas, "I think he did a dookie." They then dropped his diaper, and Sister Dumas says, "Oh my word," as she does. Then ensues a scene where Sister Dumas drops a textbook on Harold's penis over and over and over, which is described in detail that I would rather not repeat. Just know that Harold's privates are described in painstaking detail, and they drop a textbook on it 3 times. As this happens, another teacher walks in, Father Davenport. He gives a smile at the 3 students, and they seem to be very uncomfortable around him. Seeing this, Sister Dumas says that Shelley and Harold should join him in the confessional, and may God have mercy on their soul for what's about to happen. Vera drove up to the Lonely Bug Motel and noticed it looked remarkably vacant. Their usual clientele were usually leaving around this time, but it was really dead today. Vera looked at the front desk and noticed that the police were here too. This can't be good. Felix walked out and up to her car. She got out of her car promptly and walked up to Felix, who was not as horny looking as he usually was. He looked like he'd been standing in the rain all night. Purple bags adorned his eyelids. Vera asked, "What happened? Did someone get hurt?" Felix says, "Oh yeah, the big hurt. You don't even want to know, but I guess you're gonna have to know. Some pimp and his working girl. It looks like Jack the Ripper spent the night," he says. Felix says she's gonna have to clean it. Vera, shocked that violence has re-entered her life, says, "She can't clean it, what?" Felix says, "That's her fucking job, ain't it?" But it's okay, he was gonna help her out. He has something to help her, to make the clean job a little easier. An eerie feeling opened up in the pit of Vera's stomach. Felix says he got this bad boy at a flea market an hour ago. He then reveals it. A Bissell vacuum. The same type that she sold and the same type that was inserted into her womb and flushed the fetus out of her system. Vera lets out a blood-curdling scream and vomits hot vomit onto the floor. Her vision gets blurry just from the sight of the inanimate object. Felix looks at her on the floor and says, "Jesus, Vera, are you okay?" Vera says, "She can't clean this room, Felix." Felix, of course not understanding, just says, "You don't clean that room? You don't get a fucking job, Vera." Vera knew that Felix wouldn't hesitate to fire her either. She needed the money too. They needed the money. So, she dragged the Bissell up to room 13, where it happened. And as soon as she opened the door, blood and bits of bone and flesh lined the floor. It looked like someone was bludgeoned to death almost. Before she could even get started though, a voice from behind her startled her. A girl with wild hair and dark nail polish. She was gloomy and wearing a very short skirt. She didn't look a day over 18. Despite all this though, she looked sad. Tender, innocent, naive.
"I'm sorry to bother you, but the people in this room were well, not my friends, but I was staying here too,"
she said. Vera knew immediately that this girl wasn't lying. The tears in her eyes said everything. She'd experienced trauma, something Vera knew very well. It made her feel like a kindred spirit. "I'm Vera. Vera Harlow. What's your name?" she asked.
"Tina."
Tina says that she left something in this room and she needs to get it. Vera thought that whatever it was wasn't nearly as important to come back to a room like this in this state. So Vera just hugged her. Vera knew that this girl had been through hell and back. She just tells Tina that you have to figure out a way to get past this. Trauma. Tina breaks down and asks, how did she know that she'd been through hell? And Vera laughs through tears and says, have you seen my face? I have lived it. Vera asks, where's Tina's parents? Why is she hanging around in a place like this? Tina just says that her parents died before middle school. She lived with her uncle Paulie after, and he took care of her all right. Took care of her real good. At least she could now make her own choices on her own. The two sick fucks in this room turned her inside out effectively, though. Way worse than what Paulie ever did. Vera recounts her story of her parents and them dying much later in life as they continue to talk. Tina says that she didn't wake up thinking that she'd have such a soul-shaking day, but here she is. It was almost therapeutic to talk to a kindred spirit, though. Vera says just one more thing before she lets Tina go, who was once again crying. Vera says that she hopes that whatever she needs in here that they owed her, it doesn't control her. They cried a bit more, and Vera says that she has to get to cleaning. Tina is shocked that they make her clean this, but Vera says, wouldn't be the first time I've cleaned something like this. She goes to the bathroom and fills up the Bissell, and Tina opens up a vent and pulls out a baggie with some white dust and puts it in her backpack, which was adorned with a broken heart symbol on it. Tina notices that Vera noticed her and says,
Don't look at me like that. I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna sell it and never fucking look back.
Vera says that she understands, but Tina just once again says that she's never gonna fucking look back after this. Vera says she hopes so. And then another knock at the door. Vera tells Tina to climb through the window quick in the bathroom. She does so, and Vera opens it to a man who appeared to be a detective. I'm sorry, sir. I thought it was okay to start cleaning, Vera says. The detective says it is. He was just wondering why the door was locked. Vera asks if he would feel safe staying in a hotel where a room where two people were just murdered was open and in the middle of everything. The detective says he guesses not, and he introduces himself as Detective Wells. He says he came back because a lot of the time the perpetrator will return to the scene of the crime. Or better yet, sometimes cops just miss stuff at crime scenes. He looks at Vera close and says, but she doesn't seem bothered at all by any of this. Why is that? Vera was just not in the mood for his dick measuring contest and just says to look at her face and tell her. Wells says, well, you got a mouth on you, huh? Here, just look me in the eyes and tell me if anyone came back here today. Vera does so and says, no. He says, all right. He gives her his card and he leaves. She starts up the Bissell and wonders why she even lied for Tina. She just met her. As the blood got sucked up in the vacuum, she felt this was a metaphor for her life. The water being tainted by blood was just like her. Daniel sat alone in his room. Bottles of bourbon lined the floor in piles. He was alone with his thoughts. Surprisingly, though, the weird voice of Dr. Plankton rang out in his head. You are a family, though, aren't you? It said. Daniel took out a dictionary and looked up the definition of family. It says, one or more parents and their children living in a unit. That was close to what they had, he thought. It was a family. Daniel wondered, maybe this was all his fault. His hatred for the boy's real father. Maybe that's the reason Harold didn't develop that well. He never had a real father. Daniel thinks he never really tried. He rolled out of his room through the filth and looked down the hallway. Vera wasn't home yet, which was strange. She should have been home by now. Whack! What the hell was that? Whack! Whack! What was that noise? He found it coming from Harold's room, and he just knew what he was about to see was going to impede his recent thoughts of trying harder. But he opened the door anyway, and what he saw was something similar to things he's seen before, but not like this. Whack! Blood sprayed from a big rat that Harold had been smacking hard with his large math textbook. The blood hit Daniel's face, and he thought, yep, this was his family, huh? No, 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 no! He cried out. Harold didn't hesitate, though, and he did it again. He then put his little fingers inside the carcass of the rat and ripped it apart. Daniel tried to roll out of the door, but his hand slipped on the rat blood that was on his wheelchair wheels. But he got out and slammed the door behind him. He quickly got to his room and opens up another bottle of alcohol. On his dresser, he saw a picture of his closest friend in Nam, a black man with an afro. They stood there posing for a picture in Vietnam after a battle. He picked up his phone and called the number that was on the back of the picture. Morris? Who the fuck is this? Morris, it's me, Danny. Danny Harlow. Danny? Man, I thought you were dead. Sometimes it feels like it, but man, I'm in a really bad spot right now. I've got nowhere to go. I need a place to stay for a few days to get my head on straight. Morris hesitated, but he knew a call out of nowhere after a decade couldn't be good. Daniel says he understands if Morris can't, but recounting their time in Nam, the only thing Morris says is, "Remember what we used to say in Nam? Brothers till the end." By the time Vera was done with her shift, it was hours past the time she was supposed to get home. She wondered if Daniel would even notice that she was late. What a sad thought, she thought. It went by fast, though. During the cleanup, she thought about Daniel and Harold and their living situation the whole time she was trying to clean, so it went by pretty fast. She thinks about how sometimes after an especially traumatic event, it can almost attach itself to a location, cursing it almost, which coincidentally is the main theme of the book Womb, a splatterpunk book we covered that also happens to take place in a motel room. She tries her damnedest to keep that kind of thing happening from her own home with Harold, but she thinks it might be too late already. She also thought about Tina and how she actually liked that girl. It's not often you meet a kindred spirit. After she got all of the DNA off the floor, she took her cleaning supplies back to the front desk. Felix wasn't there for the night shift. It was Frank now, a quiet man who she liked a lot more than Felix. They rarely interacted because Vera didn't work at night, but he was quiet and Vera liked that. Frank was there now, and they just exchanged pleasantries. She turned on the radio in the car and heard about how a terrorist attack happened in Oklahoma City with a bombing, and how Michael Jordan began his Little League baseball career. My goat Braun could never. As she drove, she thought about what awaited her at home. A slew of nightmarish scenarios went through her head, some of which have already happened in the past. But before she knew it, she was already home, stepping through the front door. It was quiet, other than the scurrying of rats. She walked up to Daniel's room and braced herself. She knocked on the door and called out, "Daniel?" No response. She does it again, and then again. Once again, silence. She opens the door and sees Daniel's gone. Where could he have gone, she thinks. She had a horrible thought and goes into Harold's room and opens the door. Harold is also missing. His nightlight unplugged on the bed, but Harold himself, missing. She checked the entire house, calling out for Harold the whole time. "Harold!" she kept calling. She eventually checked everywhere but the basement. Did Daniel fucking kill him? She thought to herself. She knew that Harold knows not to go in the basement. She found him down there once, quote-unquote, exploring himself, and she had to reprimand him. She quickly went downstairs, and in the low light, she saw him there among the boxes. Even in the low light, she could tell he was smiling. One of his hands was covered in red, and the other was covered in brown. She didn't even have to think about the liquids on his hands and what they were. She already knew. He held his hands together as if in prayer, and then she could see the whole horrible scene. A cross stretched across the floor made an excrement in blood. It would appear that not only was poop leaking from Harold's back, but he also had been trying to deal with the rat problem in his own very fucked up way, with pure brutality. The cross was made of blood and shit on the floor, and Vera thought that maybe he saw the symbol at school and was trying to pray, but it somehow got majorly fucked up in translation through his brain. The disgust lingered, but the fear subsided. She had found Harold, but now she had another question. Where's Daniel? Shit, Danny boy, that sounded worse than anything we experienced in Nam, Morris said as he poured Daniel another glass of whiskey. Daniel says his life doesn't even feel real anymore. Morris says he gets it. He feels like a part of him is still in Nam, or even worse, maybe he took a part of Nam with him here. Morris says that Daniel has every right to feel the way he does, though. After another man raped his wife and she kept the baby after vacuuming his seed out of her. Morris does then say, though, that Vera is probably trying to do right, though. She thought the baby might bring them together, probably. Daniel says that he told her while she was pregnant that that wouldn't be the case. He begged her to get an abortion. Morris says, well, Daniel knows how women are. They always think that they know what's best for their man. His old wife sure as hell thought she did for him. Daniel pauses and says, oh, I've been talking about my life this whole time. I forgot to ask about Beth. Where is she? You always talked so amazingly about her, Morris. Morris says, well, she was amazing. But She couldn't handle his transition back to civilian life so well. It's not her fault, but it was hard. He says that he gets night terrors. He'll wake up and feel like he's back in the jungle, with Charlie just waiting for him. One night, an especially bad PTSD episode happened, and he woke up and he could have sworn Charlie was in his closet, waiting to kill his brothers, all of them. So, he took the gun that he slept with and put a bullet right in the closet in the middle of the night. But, you know what was right behind that closet? He takes a swig of whiskey and continues. His son's room. The next day, Beth packed up her stuff and left with their son, whose head was grazed by the bullet in the middle of the night. Daniel asks, did he ever reach out to them since then? And Moore says, no. Joseph was too young to remember him. And besides, he doesn't want to go back into his life and fuck it all up. Morris finishes that sentence by saying, like you and your boy. Daniel's expression turns to anger and he says, that ain't my fucking boy, Morris. Morris says, oh, so Daniel doesn't like it when the shoe's on the other foot though, huh? Morris says that he's a man. He knows what he did was wrong, and he doesn't want to make things worse for his son. Daniel needs to do the same. That boy, like it or not, depends on Daniel. Daniel, not too convinced, still says he appreciates the outside perspective. He just feels bad for up and leaving him, though. He tried not to think about it. But he wondered how Vera was doing. Tina walked down the street and was getting nervous for the stay. She had a shit ton of meth on her, and she was dressed like what she was, a hooker. She got to the bar and drew a lot of attention. Greg finally walked up to her and said, about time you showed up. Greg was her ex-boyfriend. He treated her well and accepted her, but he would do anything to score drugs. He even used to get fucked in the ass the money for drugs, and eventually he got HIV that way. He told Tina immediately, and Tina appreciated it, but they still broke up a bit later. Now they're just good friends. Was beginning to think you weren't going to show up, he said.
I came as soon as I could. Since Jeremy and Sarah got killed, things have been hectic. The motel room looked like a bloodbath, she says.
Greg asks if she's got the stuff, though, and Tina says of course she does. They exchange a small conversation, and Tina asks who are they selling this to anyway. Greg says, oh, it's a guy named Dino. He's not connected, he's just a party animal. They are going to meet him at the docks, though. Tina is a little hesitant about this, but goes along with it for now. Tina and Greg get to the docks, and Dino is on a boat that was much bigger than any of them had thought it was going to be. He had a silk scarf and was half naked, and he says he was worried they weren't going to show up. He beckons them down to the depths of the boat, both of them not expecting anything but a smooth deal to go off. As they walk down to the depths of the boat, they are greeted by a luxurious space, velvet-covered couches and expensive liquor bottles. That wasn't the problem, though. What was the problem were the three men standing down there. On the couch was Dutch Jones, a black man with big aviators on. Next to him, a fully grown iguana. He was slouched on the couch holding a cold steel Colton M1911 pistol. Next to him were two bald twins, large and intimidating. Just imagine the twins from Breaking Bad. Before either of them could think, a plastic bag was put over Greg's head and he was shoved to the ground. Before Tina could even react to this fact, though, Dutch pushed the tip of his 1911 to her skull. Tina, Dutch, and Dino looked at the ground as they positioned Greg's jaw on a small bump on the couch, and quickly, one of the twins kicks him hard in the back of his head, curb stomping him. Tina whined, and Dutch tells her to shut the fuck up unless she wants her brains to be blown out all over the minibar. Tina thought that, now, because of her, Greg was going to die. Dino asks if Tina and that gay fuck thought they could flip the ice, huh? But he's the distributor. He is the streets. They should have known that that rock was his. As he says this, the boot of the other twin crushes the back of Greg's skull. Dutch says he understands what it's like to get some shit after not having any shit, but it's his shit, so he cannot let it slide. And he's got a reputation to upkeep. However, he knows that Tina is little more than a child, and even he made mistakes in his youth. So, he's going to give her some time. Tina begs to be spared, and Dutch says once again, he's got a reputation to upkeep. He says that HIV-having bastard is paid now, though, and now she's going to, too. He whispers something into Dino's ear, and Dino whispers it to the twins. They grab Tina and they pin her to the ground. Dutch continues talking and says he's going to give her time, but sure as hell a lot less than she had before she walked in here. She might want to find a new profession after today, though, because once the streets found out about her, she's done. Dino takes a needle out and takes some blood from Greg's diseased corpse. One of the twins gripped Tina's skull with his fingers and opens her eyeball up wide so she can't close it. They position a needle right above her and quickly jabs her eyeball and squeezes the HIV-infected blood inside. She was still alive, but at that moment, Tina felt her life was over. Diseased for life. Dutch tells Tina to keep the drugs after. Pay it forward, he says, and if she needs more, she knows who to come to. Dutch then whispers to one of the twins' ears, and they unceremoniously grab Dino as he screams, "What's going on?" And they crack his back so hard that it was sickening to Tina to even watch. Dino, now also dead. I fucking hate snitches, Dutch says as he pets his iguana. Vera drove up to the Lonely Bug Motel. She parked and looked in the back seat. Harold was with her. She didn't have a choice. It was Saturday and she couldn't leave him alone. So, she made a plan. She would put Harold in room 13. She knows it's cruel to leave him there, but she has no choice. Felix would just be getting more ammunition if she told him. Plus, she could get fired. She would leave him in the room and clean all the others, and then finish with room 13. Felix wouldn't rent out the rooms if they weren't clean yet. Vera had to think about leaving her child in the room where people were just murdered, though. But once again, she had no choice. As she left with her cleaning cart, Harold says, "I love you, Mommy." That was the first time he'd ever said that. Tears well up in Vera's eyes, and she says, "I love you too, sweetie," as she leaves him there. Tina climbed up to the bathroom window of the motel room she was planning on killing herself in. She decided to do this right after she was injected with the HIV. She wasn't going to die slowly like that. She had snorted some of the meth, and it made her feel energetic and thirsty for violence. A feeling she'd never really had before, but it was just enough to give her the courage to end it all. Her heart thrashed around and she felt sick. She also had a combat knife on her that she stole from an army store nearby. It would be the instrument that she's using to end herself. She pulled up a trash can and tried to enter a bathroom window, but when she fell in, she fell head first and hit the toilet at an awkward angle, knocking her out cold instantly. Her bag fell soon after, and the half-full bag of meth spilled out after it. The noise made Harold look away from Pinky and the Brain and look in the bathroom. Harold notices a bag of white powder on the floor, and he was hungry because Vera hadn't fed him this morning. So, he sticks his fat hand in and starts eating the baggie of white powder. It was a strange chemical taste, and a strange feeling overtook him. He felt anxious, and his heart was beating out of his chest. He saw the knife on the ground near the broken woman now, and he felt weird. But Pinky and the Brain were calling to him, so he went back to the TV. After 15 minutes, the cartoon was over, and now Harold felt even worse. Screams fluctuating in volume assaulted his eardrums. Vivid colors showered the walls as well. Among these strange hallucinations, a large shadow appeared. A large shadow man. A gut larger than Harold had ever seen on a man. The top of his head was balding, but his hair was long still. His teeth were almost black, and all of a sudden, a neuron fired in Harold's brain. Was this the man Mommy and Daddy always fight about? My real father? The shadow man grunted and pointed towards the bathroom. Harold follows this hallucination and sees as he drools over the unconscious body of the woman. The shadow man pointed to the knife on the ground, like a father helping his boy pick up a baseball bat. The shadow then pointed at the scalp of the unconscious woman. Harold knew what he had to do. He sticks the knife into her scalp and pulls at the hair, exposing the pink meat of the scalp. Tina springs to life, the pain too much to keep her unconscious, but her head was reeling from the meth and the pain of her scalp being torn. Harold looked at the shadow and it pointed at her neck. He tries to shove the knife into the small woman's neck and shoves it fully through with the energy the meth had given him. Blood spurts out like a fountain. The Slob then motions him towards the eyeball of the woman, and Harold shoves the knife in her eye next, twisting and pulling it out. Blood spurting out and him extracting the eye from her skull. Harold looked back at the shadow, and the shadow made a chewing motion with his mouth. So Harold did just that, and plopped the eyeball into his mouth. The Slob looking down at him like a proud father, showing him the family business. The Slob motioned to her chest, and Harold cut open Tina's clothes, exposing her breasts and bush. The Slob sighed a sigh of proudness on the toilet. He then motioned to her uterus. Harold stuck the knife into her cavity and ripped pieces out of it. He put it in his mouth and chewed on it. Then the shadow motioned to her stomach cavity, and he sticks the knife in and begins to chew on her liver. "Yum," he says to his shadow father. And the next part I can't even describe without probably getting age restricted. Let's just say that Shadow Slob jerks off on the corpse and then teaches Harold to do the same. It's very descriptive. Anyway, on to the next chapter. Vera can't help but worry about Harold as she cleans. But she has checked the front door to the room and it's been locked the whole time, so she figures he must be fine. Even though it's been 3 hours. She eventually got nervous enough to check on him though. When she entered the room, she notices he isn't on the bed. She starts to freak out, but tries to rationalize it that he's just using the bathroom. But what's that strange scraping noise? When she opens the door to the bathroom, not even her damaged mind could have prepared her for what she saw. A mutilated corpse, with the face disfigured. Her stomach area looking like it had exploded. But the worst thing about it all was her missing scalp. She immediately got flashbacks to her time with the Slob and Sandra, a woman whom she accidentally killed while trying to escape the Slob. Her scalp looked just like that. Harold was standing over her with his pants off. Through all the disgust she felt, it was weird that disappointment was her most prevalent emotion. Vera wondered who the woman was in the room and why she was there with a knife. But to her dismay, she saw her heart bag and it became clear. "Tina, why the fuck did you come back?" she wondered as she searched her bag and found a baggie of what looked like meth. Vera's heart broke. Did Tina really lie to her? She really did do the meth. She scrambled to Harold and thought he almost looked like the Slob for a second with his bloody face. She noticed the meth dust all over his face as well as he was gnawing on a bone. He was also moving erratically. She knew that he had to have taken the meth somehow. She immediately thought all of this wasn't Harold's fault, and he didn't deserve to be punished for what happened. But she wondered if she was legally responsible for what happened here, though. She then thought about Harold and maybe she should just call the cops. No, they would ship him to some institution or something. But she wondered if that was really a bad thing. It would be a weight lifted off of her life and Daniel's shoulders. She quickly corrects herself. No, he's a child and he's never had a chance. He's innocent. She knew she had to make a decision, so she left the room and grabbed the Bissell from the front desk and told Felix she needed it for a vomit stain. She then grabbed her cleaning cart and went back to room 13. She started to clean, but realized it was gonna get messy. So she got naked and decided to get going. After she cleaned most of it, she realized something. She wasn't gonna be able to get Tina's body out of this without cutting her up. She felt Tina needed a proper burial though, but she figured this is the only way Harold gets another chance. But she has to do this discreetly. Besides, Tina betrayed her trust. She thinks to herself, man, she just can't fucking win. She gets to work and vomits as she cuts the body up and puts the pieces in trash bags. After the deed was done, and described in great detail, mind you, she grabs Harold and they both get in the shower. Once they were all clean, Vera knew she had to get all of the pieces of Tina back into her car. She filled up all the black garbage bags and put it in the back of her car and returned the Bissell to the front desk, to which Felix was thankfully absent. As soon as she turned around, though, she saw him again. Detective Wells. "Vera, you never called." Vera gives a nervous laugh and says, "Yeah, well, she didn't find out anything. She's only here in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon. And Felix keeps her busy and stuff." She knew she was talking too much. This was in stark contrast to her cold demeanor from the other day. Detective Wells then asks, "Why is your hair wet?" She says, "Oh, she just has this new shampoo that makes her hair look wet," she thinks. Wells asks, "Oh, what's it called?" And Vera says, "Oh, she doesn't remember." He says, well, his wife was looking for a new shampoo, and if she could figure out the name and tell him, that'd be great. And then gave her a smug smile. He was toying with her. She could feel it. Wells turns around and takes out a Polaroid. A picture that Vera immediately could see was Tina. He asks, "Have you seen this woman?" Her name's Tina Sparks. We think she's in some connection to this case. She's a prostitute. The picture was a little old, and Tina looked so happy and full of life in it. The exact opposite of the body she just disposed of. Vera teared up a little and says, "No, but she'll call Wells if she sees anything." He says, "Okay, God bless you." and he leaves. Vera quickly goes to check on Harold, who is still in room 13, nibbling on the bone. After Vera got home, she placed all the trash bags near the smeared cross of blood and shit in the basement. She felt bad about it, but she had to tie Harold to his bed upstairs. She had to stop this momentum somehow. She felt horrible. Everything with Daniel and now the Lonely Bug Motel and Tina. Her heart and her brain argue about Harold, saying it was the drugs that made him do it. But some people take drugs and they don't kill people. But he's just a child. But what child does this kind of thing? But Tina brought it on herself. But Harold killed her at only 7 years old. It goes back and forth like that. After she closed Harold's door, she tried to stop thinking about him for a minute. What about Tina? She said herself that she had no friends, so Vera wondered if she buried her in some grave, would anyone even care? She cursed herself for thinking that way and thought about Daniel instead. It was his fault that it happened almost. If he didn't abandon us, I wouldn't have had to take Harold to work and this wouldn't have happened. But she thinks then, she hopes Daniel's okay wherever he is though. Daniel was just outside the village. The brush was thick there and mud was all over his face. He thought about all the people that him and his fellow soldiers had to kill. A lot of them were Viet Cong, but a lot of them were also innocent women and children too. One such person was the woman he was standing over, a hole in her face from his M16. As he locked eyes with her, she tried to choke out some words, but either she couldn't say anything or he was too ignorant to understand her language. She then takes her weak, bloody hand and lifts up her skirt to show a pregnant belly. Daniel had just killed a pregnant woman. Her belly tossed and turned, almost as if the baby knew its life was over. Then all of a sudden, the belly stretched in some unnatural way. The woman's dying face twists into a contorted smile as she grabs her own stomach. Fear grips Daniel as he looks around as this happens. Then, she claws her own stomach open with a gelatinous mixture that falls out from the wound. But as the baby's head emerges, it's not a Vietnamese child, but a white baby that somehow was balding but had long hair too. The baby's yellow teeth smiling right at Daniel. It was Harold. Rats fall out of the womb as well now, and Harold jumps out and sinks his teeth into Daniel as he screams. Harold pulls a pin on his grenade, and rats dig into Daniel too as they all explode in a fiery death, and then he wakes up. It was a dream. Beads of sweat ran down his face. He looks around near the couch he was sleeping on, and Morris was looking out the window at the moon. Daniel didn't even have to ask why Morris was awake. He knew that they shared the same nightmare. I don't get much sleep anymore, Danny. Daniel says that he just had a dream where he killed a pregnant woman. Morris tries to explain that, yeah, well, that shit happens in the bush. Sometimes they just get in the way, and sometimes they just plain deserved it. Daniel just quietly says, she didn't deserve that, though. Morris says, Daniel doesn't know that. Daniel screams out, what about the baby in her belly? Did the baby deserve that? Morris says, if he was going to grow up to be one of them who kills all of us Americans, then yes, he did deserve that. War is war. Just because the papers don't report on it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Now all the people over here care more about the Viet Cong more than they care about their own damn soldiers, the ones who protected them. Daniel calms down and asks Morris if he thinks that the reason he's stuck with Harold is because he killed that woman in Nam. Morris says he doesn't believe in karma. He doesn't believe in anything anymore. If God does exist, he wants to punch him right in the face for all he made him put up with. He says, to go back to his last point, that all the Viet Cong are now coming over here, and the people are just accepting them. How pathetic, Morris thinks. Daniel says they just want a better life, like anyone. Morris says, yeah, whatever. Daniel will see eventually. They'll all see. Daniel doesn't feel like discussing war or immigration with Morris anymore. So he thought about Vera and Harold. He pictured them both crying. He wonders what he's going to do next. Okay, the next chapter is like pretty insane, even for splatterpunk standards, and it involves sacrilegion as well as sexually abusing a minor, so I'm warning you now. Just warning you. After Harold came down from his high, or at least when Vera thought he did, it was early in the morning. She decided to send him to the one place she thought a child should be. School. The beginning of the day went like any other. All the students were listening to the lesson, and it was almost time to go home. They all stared at the clock as they waited for Sister Dumas to finish the lesson. All of a sudden, the air in the room shifted, and Sister Dumas boomed out, Harold! Stop looking at the clock and pay attention to the lesson. How do you expect to learn the ways of God with your small brain if you don't pay attention? Some detention will help you learn after class. I only had detention once in my life, and it was for not putting my name on a paper. Anyway, she tells Harold to sit there while she goes and gets the other students on the short bus, and she'll be right back. After Sister Dumas gets Benji and Shelly on the bus, she calls Vera and informs her that Harold will be staying for detention today. And after it's over, she would like to speak to Vera and talk about his behavior. Sister Dumas goes back downstairs and tells Harold that she is going to help him go down the path of God. But she cannot force him to go down it, but she has a lesson for him. She rubs her old legs together as she says this. She says that Harold will find God in the most unexpected places, in the deepest, darkest places that no one would think to look. And he should find him now, too. She bends over and pulls her crusty panties down around her legs, and as she does, Harold notices something in her rectum that isn't normal. A metal cross with 1 or 2 large beads up her ass. God damn it, why am I reading this? She literally has a rosary up her ass. She yells for Harold to reach for the Lord, Harold. Harold does so, and in almost an aftershock of the meth takes a hold of his brain. It felt like the shadow slob was guiding him once more as he pulls the beads out one by one. A piece of fecal matter was stuck to one of the beads as he pulled. Sister Dumas put some pencils in her mouth and bit down, still crying for Harold to take a hold of the Lord. After he pulls out some more, another feeling overtook him. Maybe it was an aftermath of the meth, or maybe it was the shadow again. But Sister Dumas was surprised when, faster than he normally moved, Harold jumped on her back and pulled out the sturdy rosary around her neck, and the frail old woman's bones cracking. Shit fell out of her ass and pencils fell out of her mouth into the pile of shit. Harold picked up a pencil and sticks one of them in her eye. He felt aroused, so he continued. He did the same thing and plucked out the old woman's eyeballs as she tries to scream, but due to her broken neck, nothing came out. She fell into her own excrement as Harold puts the eyeball into his mouth. Vera was driving home when she thought today was actually a pretty good day. Felix left her alone, and she went home early to have Harold arrive on time. But as she sat down to poop, she got a phone call. Today wouldn't be as nice as she thought. Vera drove to school and thought whatever he got detention for, it can't be that bad, because if it was, she would have gotten a call from the police and not Sister Dumas. She thought about how she was going to deal with Tina's body. Besides, even if Daniel did come back now, he couldn't get down the stairs to see the corpse anyway. She parked in the back of the school and got out of her car. She quickly ran outside the school because it was raining, and the school looked deserted. She tried every door, but all of them were locked. She'd never actually been in Harold's classroom before, so she didn't know where it was. She called out for Sister Dumas, but no one answered. So, she checked upstairs and found that all the doors on the second floor were also locked. She got a feeling of uneasiness after she checked upstairs, and she could only think of one other place. The basement. But no one would hold a class in a basement, right? Which, actually, I did have one in a basement as a kid, which coincidentally was also in a Catholic school. She slowly turned the door, and what she saw, she almost couldn't comprehend at first. Harold lying on top of the nun, who was naked from the waist down in a pile of shit. Harold was chewing on a rather large rosary that was caked in poop. Harold, what have you done? Was the only thing she could say. The old woman was dead, bloody as could be. The scene was so weird that Columbo probably couldn't even solve it. She had to keep her balance as she almost fainted at the sight, and she had to stumble around. She fell to the floor and saw something shiny near her hand, and she picks it up, and she realizes it's a key ring. She didn't know why, but she went to the desk of Sister Dumas and then unlocked the drawer, and she then found it. Dozens of pornographic photos of her son, among the other 2 students in her desk. Some of which was him chewing on religious pieces, and some of which where they were inserted into his rectum. They were torturing him, Vera thought. No wonder Harold was the way he was. The one place she thought was normal in his life was causing him the most trauma. She knew the old lady on the ground was not a woman of God. She was an imposter. The past few days of Harold's behavior wasn't his fault, she thought. It was this monster of a school and this woman. She had to keep it together, though. She went into the closet and found a cleaning cart. it was time to get to work. Cleaning the body was not an easy job. Lugging her body up the stairs in bags was also not an easy job, and it took a lot out of Vera. She got them in the back of her car again, and it didn't help that it was all in the rain. Thankfully, the school was quite secluded, so she could get the body and Harold home easily. She left Sister Dumas's body right next to Tina's in the basement near the shit-smeared cross. All the people in this world were shit, Vera thought. She wanted to give Tina the benefit of the doubt, but it seemed that even people who had been with her for a decade began to show their true colors to her. She didn't want to think about Daniel like that, but she had to. But she had to figure out what to do with these bodies first. However, the school would figure something was off when Sister Dumas was no longer able to be reached. But at the same time, she didn't want to put Harold back in that school after what they did. But it would also be really suspicious if he would disappear the same night that Dumas did. She decided that Harold would just have to be homesick tomorrow. That would probably not be as suspicious. But it felt like the world was crashing down around her. She had no one to talk to about any of this. She had to burden it alone. But what about Dr. Plankton? She couldn't tell him everything, but maybe he could help her in some small way. After she left and locked the basement, she made some food for Harold and went up to his room and gave it to him. She said she loved him and then left him in his room and locked it, which she had gotten a deadbolt right after the first bit of violence with Tina. But she didn't want to think of him that way. But she was worried. Worried that Harold would become the Slob and not overcome him. Flies had started to invade the household as of late too. It made Vera's skin crawl. The heat made the smell even worse in the house as well. Things were just festering. She wondered if things would ever go back to normal, or if she would die in this house and the police would find her rotting corpse among the maggots in the garbage. She felt dizzy thinking about the future as she picked up the phone to call Dr. Plankton. Daniel sat and watched TV, but he was more thinking to himself than watching. He'd gone through so much to avoid thinking about that time in the jungle. He tried to bury it, first with drinking, then with therapy, and finally with Vera. He'd been successful until last night. It made him see his life in a different light. He knew the dream had come back to him for a reason. He thought to himself, what kind of man am I that I can kill an unborn child and her mother, and then turn my back on a child with no father? He also wondered about Vera. This sort of thing was something that could push someone over the edge after all Vera's been through. Who was he not to be there for her when she needed him? She was always there for him. Morris came out of the bathroom and asked, what's up? Daniel says, he needs to go back. Morris says, now? I figured you would, but right this minute? Daniel says he has to go back, but he'll wait till tomorrow. He apologizes for putting Morris through all of this, and Morris tells him not to apologize. He's doing the right thing. Morris says that he can tell there's a light at the end of the tunnel for Daniel. He wishes he had the same light, but Daniel can get through this. A new light flashed in Daniel's eyes. He sure as hell was going to try. The usual look of annoyance on Dr. Plankton's face was replaced with pity tonight. Normally, he wouldn't see his clients this late, or on such short notice, but when Vera had explained that Daniel had left over the phone, he felt some sort of pity for her. He explains that sometimes the weight of everything can be too crushing for a person, so they just run from it. He says that Daniel will come back, though. Vera says she doesn't know how she's going to do this anymore. Her life feels like one tragedy after another. Not a single day goes by without her thinking about ending it. Dr. Plankton says, the world's a better place with people like you in it, Vera. Without talking about the suicidal ideations any longer, he asks, how's Harold, though? Vera lies and says, the same. Oblivious. She slams her hand on the table and Plankton asks her to calm down. He's here to help. Vera knew that she couldn't tell him about the murders, but she asks how she could possibly get through this. Plankton says, well, if anyone can, it's her. That made her feel a bit better, but immediately after he says, things can always get worse. Vera then explodes. How can this get worse? She felt anger more than she'd ever felt before, but it felt good almost. Dr. Plankton shakenly says, well, Daniels can still come back. It's only been a few days. And if he came back right now and saw her like this, how would he feel? Vera agrees. Not good, probably. But Vera asks, what if he doesn't come back? Dr. Plankton says, well, he didn't leave a message or anything, right? Why wouldn't he come back? Is she not telling him something? That was a loaded question, she thinks. But she just gets angry again and rises to her feet. She says, why would he? She is a mentally deranged, ill child from a murderer. She clenches her teeth and Dr. Plankton once again says, calm down. They're gonna get through this. Vera throws his pencil out of his hand and knocks a glass vase over and says, what don't you get? It's over. I've lost. It's done. There was a look of complete shock and horror in his face as Vera storms out of the room. She could be here no longer. The next day, Vera did her job as normal. She locked Harold in his room while she worked at her job. She had no choice. It was the last room she needed to clean before she went home, though. Room 13. She didn't like being in this room due to everything that happened in it. She wondered how she was going to get out of this, though. If it were just Sister Dumas, it might be okay to explain what happened if she didn't hide the body, with the sexual assault and all. But Tina made things difficult. She had to think of something. Then, she remembered there was a bridge nearby that someone once committed suicide on the other year. They still haven't found his body because the water below was so deep. Maybe she could tie something heavy to the trash bags and drop them over when no one was nearby. Maybe she was interrupted by a knock at the door behind her. Detective Wells and another man in navy raincoats. Very good to see you again. You're probably wondering why me and Detective Bates are here to see you. Vera says she doesn't know, nervously. A small world, maybe? She says nervously. Wells says, well, he works in the homicide department, and Detective Bates here works in missing persons. It just so happens that someone has gone missing recently. Somebody who Vera was the last person they talked to. Vera tries to act surprised. Oh my god, who was it? They ask if she has a son named Harold. She says, yeah, she does. And they say that a certain Sister Dumas at his school has gone missing. She never got back to the nunnery last night, something she hasn't done since 1948 when she arrived there the first time. Vera says, well, she watches detective shows. Don't the police usually wait 48 hours before they investigate? Detective Wells says, cut the shit, Vera. She should know by her dumb detective shows that the first 24 hours the person has gone missing is the most important. He asks her if she talked to Sister Dumas yesterday after class for something. Vera says, yes, it was about Harold's behavior, she supposes. As soon as she said that, she knew she fucked up. You suppose, Detective Wells says? Wouldn't you know? You talked to her. Vera recoils and says she meant that Sister Dumas said it was due to his short attention span, and she supposed that it had something to do with distracting classmates, that's all. The detectives ask if she had an argument with her or anything last night, and Vera says, of course not. St. Leo's Catholic School has a very wonderful program for mentally ill children for charity. Without that, Harold wouldn't even be able to get an education. She's very grateful for St. Leo's and Sister Dumas. The detectives then ask, where did they talk in the school? Vera says, in the main office, and then in the hallway after. She wanted to keep them out of the basement, the real murder scene. She'd wiped down everything she touched yesterday, but she had to be sure. They ask, then how did the meeting end? Vera says, well, Sister Dumas made him say prayers when he got home, but they just left after the meeting. She says Sister Dumas was a strict woman, but a good woman. She felt that that lie was good enough. Vera says there really isn't anything else to say other than that she hopes that the detectives find Sister Dumas. They say, okay, but don't leave town for the next couple days. They might need to follow up with her. They give her their card, and they leave. She knew one thing for sure after that encounter. She had to get rid of the fucking bodies in her basement. Daniel arrived at the front door with a new conviction. No matter how bad things got, he would weather the storm with Vera. He had to. He opened the door, and it was eerily quiet in their house, as if the rats and cockroaches were even surprised to see him. He had a while before Vera got home from work, though, so he just sat down. He wished he could have done more for Morris, his brother. He hopes that that wasn't the last time he'd ever talked to him. Daniel was shaky. He wanted nothing more than to see Vera, hug her, and apologize. But Danny knew what he had to do, and he saw the garbage bags lying all over the floor. He would start to clean up and show Harold that this was no place to live in. It would rub off on him. He rolled up to Harold's room and notices the new lock. He opens it and goes inside. Harold was supposed to be at school, but he was just here on the bed. No matter, he thought. Harold just stared at him motionless without any emotion. Harold, I'm sorry I left you, but I'm back for good. We are going to get back on track with all of this filth, and it will soon be a bad memory. Daniel starts to fill up the garbage bag with filth and mouse droppings and continues to talk to Harold. Me and your mom used to clean this place a long time ago, and we're gonna do it again. This is a new day, Harold. He continued to fill the bags, and Harold looked at Daniel. It's gonna get better, Harold. I promise. What do you say, son? Will you help me? This was the first time that Harold could remember when Daniel called him son. Harold nodded and got up, with a full diaper, mind you, and he grabbed a garbage bag. A hot flash hits Harold's mind, and he saw him again, the shadow slob. He was as real as anything. Harold looked at the garbage bag and thought, that's where Mom puts people. People liked to be in the garbage bags, right? The shadow slob urged Harold to put his father in the bag too. Harold rubs his temples, confused. The shadow slob had never steered him wrong before, right? That's where people go, right? In the bag. So fill it up. Now, the shadow slob spoke to him. Harold pounced on Daniel and put the bag over his father's head as he fell off the wheelchair. Daniel struggled. The only thing he could breathe in was the hot fecal air of Harold's diaper. He struggled hard, harder than the other two. He scratched at Harold's arms, hoping they would get him to stop. That's where people go, the son of the slob said as he continues to choke Daniel. Daniel tries to dig into his arms deeper, but soon his actions slowed, and then stopped altogether. Daniel's last thoughts were of Vera, and how he wished he got to tell her that he loved her one last time, and of their first kiss. After Daniel passed, Harold rolled off his stepfather. He didn't know why, but he looked under his bed and found an especially large rat that he knew was there. It had matted fur and beady eyes. Harold salivated and laughed. Vera raced home as fast as she could. She couldn't wait to deal with the bodies any longer. She had a plan. The night was already getting cloudy and gloomy, though. As she got home, she thought to herself, you can do this. One short drive and it's all over. But when she opened up her front door, nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. It looked like Daniel had returned home, but he was at the kitchen table with a black garbage bag over his head. She was reminded of her time in the slob's house, with Sandra and her black garbage bag over her head. Though unlike Sandra, there was no movement in Daniel. The light in her life had died, and only one person could have done it. Harold, her deranged son. Her blood boiled. Just then she saw movement in the black bag, so she grabbed the first knife she could find in the kitchen and ripped open the plastic bag on her husband's head. Though when she ripped it open, she saw his eyes were devoid of any life. She ripped it down further and saw something huge and hairy in his airway. It was a rat clawing and scraping inside Daniel's mouth. Vera fell backwards and tries to scream, but nothing came out. Her thoughts of reuniting with Daniel were just that. Thoughts. She felt a wave of anger and she got to her feet and yelled at the rat to leave Daniel alone! And she took the knife and stabbed it hard into the rat as it squealed. It felt good to hurt it. She kept attacking until she decapitated the rat and its head fell to the floor and it twitched. It felt good to get the rat out of his throat. And from behind her, though, a voice. That's where people go. Vera saw her son behind her, smiling cruelly. Harold, what have you done? What have you done to Daniel? She screamed at him. She couldn't cover for him this time. Couldn't explain it away. She then says something that I will read in full, as it pretty much is the essence of how she feels. The outrage inside me screamed. I was no longer able to defend him. Maybe I never should have in the first place. I always wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was a victim of circumstance, a child of rape. He was not mentally sound. He was born without the most basic human faculties. In advocating for Harold and trying to find the light that lied behind his darkness, I had conditioned myself to look past his most obvious characteristic. He was evil. You fucking monster! She screamed at him and charged the child with a knife. She had every intention on using it on her son as she pounced on him. She tried to plunge the knife into his face, but he turns at the last second, so it clips his chin and cuts open his jaw. She felt excited to see the blood come off the child. She held his head with her other hand so he couldn't move this time. She realized that there was none of her inside this child. This was only the son of the slob. As she lifted the knife, she felt a burning sensation as 2 bullets entered her chest. She felt weak as she slumped off her child. She stayed conscious long enough to see a navy blue coat. Detective Wells calls out to his partner. You had no choice. She was going to kill the kid. Kid, are you okay? Vera's heart began to slow, but she couldn't do anything about it. She wanted her last thoughts to be of Daniel, but she fell too far away from him. She outstretched her hand at nothing and just said, I love you. I'm sorry. As she fell away from the light. Detective Wells looked at the sacrilegious cross of blood and shit on the basement floor. The rest of the CSI team noticed the black bags all over the cross. They opened it up and... bingo. Sister Dumas. Wells wasn't that surprised. But what were the other bags? They found a couple arms, legs, and other things in them. Detective Bates comes down and says, this is why he doesn't do homicide cases, as he shows Detective Wells a bunch of photos he found in Vera's jeans pockets. Pictures of Harold, against a nondescript black background, with things in his butt. I feel less bad about shooting this bitch now, Detective Bates says. Wells says he did what he had to do. Wells says she looked like she was some sort of religious zealot or something, with this cross and the murders. Bates says upstairs he also found a deadbolt on the kid's door, not to mention ropes and stuff tied to his bed. She'd been abusing him, they figure. Plus, the kid was already mentally ill, and in a disgusting place like this. Bates says he bets his entire pension that this will fuck that kid up for life. Wells says he wondered what all of this was for with the bodies and such. Bates says, well, the 2 bullets that he put in her will make sure they never find out. They say, well, at least Harold will now get another chance. Later that day, Detective Wells went to Dr. Plankton's office, where he asks where Vera was the last time he saw her. Plankton says, right there, in that seat. Wells says, well, what was she talking about last time? Dr. Plankton says, well, you know, there's the issue of confidentiality and all that. Wells tells him to cut the shit. Vera's dead, it doesn't matter now. Dr. Plankton brandished a shit-eating grin and asks Wells why he wants to even know. Wells says he wants to know what the reason for all of this was. What reason could someone have to have done something like that? What she did. Call it a morbid curiosity, he says. Plankton slyly says, well, he usually charges people for this sort of thing. Wells booms out that he's not going to give Plankton another fucking chance here. He'll fuck his life up if he doesn't tell. Plankton swallows and says, okay. She was having troubles with her husband, and there were also issues with her son. It wasn't looking good. Wells says, what does he mean, her son? Doesn't he mean their son? He says that Harold was a child of rape. Vera decided to keep the baby and not have an abortion after, whether it was because of the trauma or just the fact that she didn't want to see another life end. Wells has just as good of a guess as Plankton does. Dr. Plankton says he's surprised she didn't snap sooner, honestly. Wells says now he's even more confused. Dr. Plankton sounds like he's saying that it wasn't even her fault what happened, like she was some sort of saint or something. Plankton says, well, even the devil used to be an angel, Detective Wells. At St. Leo's, many had gathered for Sister Dumas's funeral. Father Davenport gives a eulogy at the pulpit. He went on for a while before he says, the children she touched will remember her most of all. He found himself quite funny at the double meaning, and while he remembers this, he takes out his member and begins to stroke it at the funeral. He made sure to cover it with the pulpit from the crowd, but the altar boys standing near him could see it and watch in disgust, victims of Father Davenport himself. As he finishes, he shudders and says, it's just really hard for me. Sorry. The children will never forget her. And neither will I. Child Protective Services rolled up to the huge building. In front read, King's House of Children. Michael tells Harold that it's going to be great, he'll see. Harold didn't say a word. He just sits in the passenger seat. They walked in and Michael tells him that they need to get in before they drip all their wet clothes inside the nice people's house. They go inside and they meet Charles King, a nice man who extends a hand towards Harold saying he'll fit right in this orphanage. Michael gives King the folder with Harold's information and he says, he's all yours now, Charles. Michael says, Harold's been through a lot and he doesn't talk much. King says, oh, well, flowers don't bloom in a day. They'll be fast friends, right, Harold? Michael leaves them, and King begins to walk Harold up the chipped cobblestone stairs into a hallway with a large wooden door at the end. It felt evil. King struggled and opened the door. In this room was filled with silent hostility. Tons of deformed children staring holes through Harold. Here, he wasn't the odd one out anymore. He was just one of many. We have a new runt, everybody, Charles King calls out. He looks down at Harold, at the blackened heart of the little boy, and says, from here on out, you'll call me King, as I am king of this castle. All of a sudden, Charles King takes the blanket that was next to him and tosses it over Harold's head. All of the deformed children then rushed him, like in some sort of hazing ritual, and beat him hard. They pounced on him, beat him, kicked him, punched him, and any other form of violence they could think of in their heads, and it was all inflicted on Harold. But this pain was something of a comfort to Harold. Pain never left him in the middle of the night like anybody else. It was like an old friend. King lifted the blanket, and him and the other boys were shocked by what they saw. Harold lying in the pool of blood, his nose bent sideways, and he was having trouble breathing. But not because he was hurt too bad, because he was laughing too hard. 11 years had passed since that day, and St. Leo's looked exactly the same. Not to mention Father Davenport did too. He left some flowers on the altar and put a peppermint candy in his mouth. As he does, a foul smell perforates his nostrils. He notices that the smell is coming from the confessional. He thought to himself that these people in this church are animals. But as soon as he gets this confession over with, the sooner the smell will leave. He enters the confessional and then sits down. The person on the other side, you could tell, was huge and obese through the confessional window. But he was also silent. So Davenport awkwardly tries to help him. "Hello, my son. How long has it been since your last confession?" "Father," the voice said. "Yes, my child," he replied. But before he could say anything else, the large hands of this man broke through the fencing between the confessional booths and lashed onto Davenport's nose. "Liar," he said as Davenport realized who this was. It was a deep memory for Father Davenport, but not for Harold. Tons of people entered the church that week. They were getting restless as Mass hadn't started yet, and it was kind of getting late. The sisters didn't know what to do, as Father Davenport had never missed a service. The altar boys waited as well. One of them notices Father Davenport's robe on a chair, though, and it looked slightly discolored. The altar boy went to lift it, and a terrified scream erupted from the crowd of the church. Father Davenport's head, the only thing that lies under the robe, bleeding heavily, his tongue missing from when Harold had eaten it, and the word liar spelled with a Y written in blood under it. Everyone screamed, but the boy who found it didn't. He smiled. It was the first time he had felt free in months. That is it. That is The Son of the Slob by Aaron Beauregard. As I said, it's just as bad as the original, but with a little bit more substance. There isn't a ton to talk about like the original, but there's at least a few things we can go over. So let's get into those. But before we do, thank you for watching this video. It means a lot. So let's get into it. The first one I get is nature versus nurture argument. It is the classic theme that a lot of literature has. Is it nature that defines you, or is it nurture? Is he the son of the slob because he was born that way? Or did he become the son of the slob due to his upbringing? Is he Satoru Gojo because he is strong, or is he strong because he is Satoru Gojo? However, in this book, I believe the author is saying both, actually. There is not a one-size-fits-all for this kind of thing. Harold was doomed by both nature and nurture. He grew up with so much abuse that he became like that, and he was also born into it as well. Nature and nurture both define you. Another message I get is how escapism is not good when used to solve all your problems. Although yes, Vera does try very hard to help Harold. She also uses the people of the church as a crutch, and whenever something goes wrong, it is always someone else's fault that Harold turned out this way. Now, of course, Vera is extremely broken and traumatized, and it's horrible what happened to her, and obviously it should never happen to anyone. But she has also become complacent for Harold as well. She pawns him off on the church, on Daniel, on Pinky and the Brain, and on the babysitter. All of which fail her, and him. And she says that too. It's good that she's in therapy, and I feel that was one of the only truly good places that she was getting help. But in the end, not even that could save her from herself. Alright, all together now, the next theme is the cycle of abuse. Once again, Vera is an extremely sympathetic protagonist because of all she went through. But this book shows that trauma can infect those it touches, making it nearly inescapable. Vera ends up creating the next slob. She is in filth and does nothing about it. Of course, it's not that easy, but she still doesn't do anything. In the end, the cycle of abuse corrupts all who it touches, and it drags Harold into it as well. Adding more characters into the mix as well, like Tina, who deserved none of that, who was voiced by a friend of mine, by the way, and Sister Dumas, who also traumatized and destroyed Harold's mind, not to mention Father Davenport, all of which get caught in the cycle. One that is nearly impossible to escape. But of course, there are other themes in this book I did not cover, but I believe those are the main ones. But what do you think? Did I get them right, or do you have a different opinion? Please tell me in the comments below what you think. Thank you all for watching. I want to apologize first of all because the next book review was going to be Dracula, but I think I'm going to hold off on that one a bit because it's such a long project that I'm going to work on it in between videos. Instead, we will probably be doing Christopher Triana's They All Died Screaming instead. I really do love each and every one of you, and all of you mean the world to me, and words cannot describe how each and every one of you have changed my life. You are all heroes to me, so thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.